heard, heart disease is the rampaging #1 killer in America.
We were planning to bring you this next story even before we got word of the sudden death of Gary Shandling from an apparent heart attack at just 66 years old.
Lifetime risk of developing heart disease after the age of 40, this is for women, is 32%.
With an alarming new study that's shedding light on the link between alcohol and heart disease for women.
A research by Kaiser Permanente, Northern California, found women who drink more than one drink a day are up to 50% more likely to develop heart disease.
It says, keep the heart with all diligence, because out of it are the issues of life. How can we keep the heart with all diligence? I'm going to be looking at a couple of things tonight. I'm going to show you how to keep the heart with all diligence, but I'm going to also show you about the issues of life. What do you think the issues of life is? The issues of life is the blood that's, of course, being pumped by the heart. And when our heart stops, we stop. So there are many things that you can do that can keep that heart strong. The heart is a muscle. That muscle is continually beating, and that heart muscle is made up of a whole lot of little cells. So to understand how the heart runs, to understand what it needs, to understand what weakens it, to understand what strengthens it, we need to go to the CBD, the Central Business District of the human body. So here is our cell, and this week we've been looking at the glucose coming in. Last night we looked at insulin, and we had a look at the fact that insulin is the key that unlocks the door to get the glucose into the cell. And once the glucose goes into the cell, it goes through a 20-step pathway. And that 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. That's why we eat, isn't it? So that it breaks down in our gut, gets transported to the liver, which sends it to the cell. Now, the end result of the 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate is the chemical form of glucose that gets fed into the powerhouse. Called the powerhouse because this 8-step pathway delivers to us an amazing 36 units of energy. What makes the difference? How come an 8-step pathway gives us 36 units of energy and a 20-step pathway only gives us 2 units of energy? It's oxygen. So you could call this pathway an anaerobic pathway because it uses oxygen, whereas this pathway is an anaerobic pathway because it doesn't use oxygen. So obviously, by looking at this, if our heart muscle, which is made up of all these little, specifically we'll look at muscle cell, if it's getting enough oxygen, can you see that it is going to be stronger? Can you see that it is going to pump more efficiently? So how can we ensure that our cells are getting enough oxygen? Well, there's a few ways that you can ensure that the heart is getting enough oxygen, and that is by the way that you breathe. Our body was designed so that our abdominal muscles were used in the breathing process. When you use your abdominal muscles in the breathing process, then you are getting full oxygen quotient. And many people today have a hunchback, many people have poor posture, and also, many people have tight clothes. You should be able to put your fist in your skirt or your pants, allowing those abdominal muscles to go in and out with the breathing process. Now, one of the reasons why people don't have a strong back, don't have good posture, is because their abdominal muscles are weak. You see, our abdominal muscles are basically like our core muscles. And you ask any massage therapists. They can tell the strength of the human body by the strength of the core. So it's very important to have good core muscles, because good core muscles mean that our spine is a little straighter, and when our spine is a little straighter and our shoulders are back, we can use our abdominal muscles in the breathing process. So it's a little bit what comes first, the chicken or the egg, but really what comes first is those strong abdominal muscles. One lady said, well, my core muscles are long gone. I said, well, if you were, you'd be standing like this. Because it's our core muscles that cause us to stand up straight. And every one of our abdominal muscles is linked to our spine. That's why when you strengthen those muscles, you automatically pull your spine up straight, allowing your abdominal muscles to be used in the breathing process. Many people have become high chest breathers. The Framingham study, which is a study I looked at last night, a little town of Framingham, over 30 years, 25,000 people, so it's a very reputable study. They found by the age of 50, people had lost 40% lung capacity. And we can use the old saying in many areas, and we're going to use it in our brain on Saturday morning, that if you don't use it, you will lose it. And our lungs have got, I think, should have about 300 million little tiny alveoli, and those little alveoli is where the gaseous exchange takes place. To ensure that we have adequate oxygen so that our cells can get down to here, because if we don't have adequate oxygen, some of our cells are going to run up there. How much energy is that going to give us? Not very much. So very important to strengthen those abdominal muscles. How can you do that? Exercise. You must exercise every day. Are you familiar with Pilates stretches? You can Google Pilates. You can get a Pilates DVD. You can actually go to a Pilates class in most cities once a week and start to strengthen those abdominal muscles. You wouldn't think I would be going to be talking to you about abdominal muscles when I'm talking about the heart. But to get those lungs open wide, we need to be using our abdominal muscles so they're strong, so they hold that spine straight, so you can use them with the breathing process. Now, another reason why many people don't have full lung capacity is because they don't exercise. Last night, I touched on the interval training. What I want to do tonight, I want to go one step further and show you why the interval training is so powerful in strengthening that heart muscle. So let's have a look at the interval training. We'll go over it again for the people who weren't here last night and for the people who were here last night, so we can recap it. Interval training, as the name implies, is intervals of high intensity and intervals of recovery, and it's usually done for a cycle. Now, how long you do high intensity depends basically on your fitness level. And most of the research that is done with interval training is usually 20 or 30 seconds high intensity. That's running as hard and as fast as you can, or cycling as hard and as fast as you can, or doing push-ups as hard and as fast as you can, or swimming as hard and as fast as you can. It's not very long. Only let's put in a 20 second. We'll be kind to you. 20 seconds high intensity. That's about a 60-second recovery, usually done for a cycle of 6. Now, at our health retreat, a lot of people that come to us are not very fit. And I thought most of them cannot do a 20 or even 30 seconds high intensity. And then I heard of a talkback radio show that talked about this, and they were doing 7 seconds high intensity, 14 seconds recovery for a cycle of 7. I'm immediately interested because I'm a Bible student, and if you look at numerology all through the Bible, the factor of 7 comes up many times. And you look at the human body, 7 holes in our hands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 28 cycle in a woman's cycle, 7 days in a week. The factor of 7 is woven all through. So I love the 7 number. I also knew that Anyone can do a 7 seconds high intensity. Now remember, this is going really hard and fast. In his book Pace, Dr. Al Sears, he talked about a lady who was 58. She's very unfit. She did 7 seconds high intensity and she needed 15 minutes to recover. I tell you that because if you're that, it's all right, because if you keep doing it every day, you will find that your recovery time will get less and less and less. And your fitness is not determined by how hard and fast you can go, but how long you take to recover. The reason why Dr. Al Sears' book is called Pace, and the letters mean progressive. That's the P, progressive. Because as you do it, you will get fitter, you will get stronger, your recovery time will be less, you will be able to go further and further time, and you'll be able to put more of the cycles into your interval training exercise. But the exciting thing about this, it is so quick. It's just a tiny little nugget of a day. You can actually do it for about 15 minutes a day. That's exciting, isn't it? Because most of us, and this is the biggest complaint I have at Misty Mountain Health Retreat, people say, well, I was exercising, but I just don't have time. You know, you don't have time not to do this. If you want to enjoy the latter days of your life, you've got to start implementing this interval training. Because remember, we're training for something more important than the Olympic Games. We're training for life. And we're training for those latter years of life. So let's have a look at pace. Progressive acceleration. You are moving. This is no gentle stroll. And this morning when Amelia and I were running up and down the hills, I think in the Bombay Hills, is that what they are? There are times when we stop talking. And that's when we're running very, very fast. So acceleration, this is no gentle stroll. And as Amelia said, you got to get to the point where you feel like you're dying. Got that? You feel like you're dying. Because I know with myself, we usually do 30 seconds. When I get to 20 seconds, my body says, enough. But you push yourself. You push yourself that little bit further. That little bit further. And every day you'll go that little bit further. If you want to bring your fitness program down to 15 minutes, you're going to have to be working very, very hard. But it's just a little chunk. And it makes an incredible difference for the whole day. And what are you putting into that muscle cell? What are you putting into that heart cell? You are delivering massive amounts of oxygen. I remember when I was a little girl, I was in a family of 7, and we all were real skinny, and we squeezed into the little Morris Minor. And sometimes we'd go to the bush and have a picnic, and one day, when we got in the car wouldn't start. So Dad went out and got a jack handle and poked it in the front and wound up the engine, got it going, jumped in the car, and off we went. We're right. Do you know that's what this does in the morning? It's like you're getting the jack. Maybe it's a very old illustration. And you're winding up that body and it'll run at a more efficient and effective rate all day long. That's why the morning is the best time to do it. So let's look at pace. Progressive acceleration, cardiopulmonary. The C is talking about cardio. We have our fitness coordinator at our health retreat. His name's Howard. I think there are pictures of him on our website. He's 52 and all the guests think he's 35. He's very fit, he is very strong, and he rides his bike to work every day, and he rides up hills like this, and his resting heart rate is 46. That's pretty low, isn't it? 46 beats per minute. I think Howard will still be working for us at the age of 90, the way he's going. The guests cannot believe this guy. And you know what he does for fun? So let's think about it. He wakes up the guests at 6 o'clock. So what time does he wake up to get the guests up at 6? He must wake up at 5. And he takes them through their exercise program. Then he goes home and he usually goes on another exercise routine with his wife. And then he has breakfast. And then he comes back later and he massages the male guests. And In the afternoon, he lights the steam bath because our guests have a steam sauna down by the creek every afternoon where they get hot in the sauna, then they dive in the creek, back in the sauna. So he probably gets home about 6 at night. Now, one evening, Michael and I are going to town. We're about an hour from town. And we're coming home from town. We're halfway home and it was dark. And we saw this light on the road. We thought, what's that? And we got closer. It's a cyclist. We got closer. It's Howard. For fun, after work, he goes and rides 20 Ks on his bike. Wow. We've worked with Howard for 15 years. Do you know he's always the same? He's always exactly the same. Do you know what this tells you? This exercise, this pumping of oxygen right into the cell, this is happening in all your brain cells. This is actually affecting the way you think. It's affecting your mood. It's affecting every single part of your body, because you think about it, we are just a bunch of cells. But these cells specifically that we're looking at tonight are the heart cells, because that heart muscle is made up of muscle cells. So progressive acceleration of cardiopulmonary. If you don't have a 46 beat per minute heart rate, do you know you can get it? You can get it. We may not all come up to the standard of the Olympic Games, the Olympic athletes, but we all can be fit. Howard's fitness is not genetics. Howard's fitness is because he works at it. And anything in life, the more you put into it, the more you will get out of it. So, progressive acceleration of cardiopulmonary. What's pulmonary? That's the lungs. I've already touched on the lungs. And the only way to prevent losing 40% lung capacity by the age of 50, the only way to prevent losing 60% lung capacity by the age of 80 is to move those lungs every day. You got to get it to the point where you're literally heaving every day. And if you have lost lung capacity, you can regain it. So if you've lost it, you can regain it. If you haven't lost it, you can prevent losing it. That's the good news. And that's going to affect every cell in your body. It actually makes the difference whether you've got energy or haven't got energy. The bottom line is, for chronic fatigue syndrome, is just lack of oxygen. Because look at that. My cell's got oxygen. How much energy have I got? 36 units of energy. Wow. Compared to 2 units of oxygen. So if you want to feel good, you've got to move. So progressive acceleration of cardiopulmonary exertion. There's your pace. You are exerting yourself big time. What I didn't tell you yesterday about this equation was the effect of this exercise on the cell. Now, to understand this, we need to know that this process here, or this 20-step pathway, is very fast. This 8-step pathway is very slow. And when you're getting to the end of your 20 or 30 seconds high intensity, the 20-step pathway speeds up. The 8-step pathway speeds up. No wonder you're starting to move very fast. But when you start to go faster, a rate-setting enzyme's in there that will always have this pathway faster than this pathway. So when you're starting to move and move fast, you're going to produce more pyruvate than you can use. And so now the body stores it as lactic acid. Here's our lactic acid stores. You've heard of lactic acid? Now, listen carefully, because I think this is the most exciting part of this whole equation. When you're in recovery time, what's recovery? Now, recovery might be... It might be standing still, just getting your breath. In fact, we had a big hill this morning, and so halfway up, we stopped. And in our recovery time, we were doing some stretches. So recovery time might be still. Sometimes my recovery time is just going slowly down the hill. Often my recovery time compared to running as fast as I can is just walking. So depending on your fitness, depending how you feel after your high intensity, depends on recovery. If someone's really fit, their recovery time might just be like this compared to going for it. In recovery time, your liver converts this lactic acid back to pyruvate and feeds it into the powerhouse. Do you know what this means? When you're in recovery time, just standing still maybe, your cell is burning just as much fuel, just as fast as when you're running for your life. Isn't that good news? So when you're in recovery time, it's not an excuse because you can't go any further. It's necessary to mop up your lactic acid. Question: if someone goes on a 5K jog without stopping, what's happening to their lactic acid? It's building up, isn't it? It's building up. And tomorrow night, I'm going to show you the acid-alkaline balance in the body. We're going to look at foods that leave an acid ash in the cell. We're going to look at foods that leave an alkaline ash in the cell. Have you ever read stories in the newspaper? Al Sears has quite a few in his book about a 45-year-old guy doing a 5K jog, keels over, dies, heart attack. Yeah. We've all read of the stories. And the couch potato says, look at that. Look at him. Didn't do him any good. So he stays on his couch. Do you know why that happens? Let me tell you. Let's say the man, the night before, had a very acid meal. What would be an acid meal? Steak, chips, bread, sugar ice cream for dessert, maybe some red wine at the meal. All of those foods break down to acid in the cell, which we'll look at tomorrow night. He goes to bed, he gets up in the morning, he doesn't drink water, which is alkalizing. He drinks that, Gatorade, or, those high energy drinks. More acid in the cell. He's jogging along, the lactic acid's building up. What's happening there? We get a tip of acid at the cellular level. A tip of acid at the cellular level slows down the blood and he has a heart attack. Whereas there is no known heart attack of a person in the middle of interval training. And you can see why, because in recovery time, what's being mopped up, students? The lactic acid. No wonder the trainers are finding today that this interval training gives their athletes an edge. When they train with the interval training, their athletes have that extra little go, which is necessary, of course, to win the race, to break the goal. Was very popular, was just becoming popular before the war. In Germany, a lot of trainers were doing this. In the war, a lot of things were lost. Then a Japanese trainer, he started doing it in about the 80s. In fact, in many gyms, you can go through the Tabata protocol. Doug McGuff, he's another doctor, cardiac surgeon, who started to put his patients on that with remarkable results. Doug McGuff says, when you start implementing this, we're not going to be able to hold you down because you're going to be, when can we start moving? For the people with chronic fatigue, you say, do you exercise? What's the answer? Oh, you don't understand. I don't have the energy. Guess how you get it? And remember, you can start with 7 seconds. But you've got to push yourself a little bit more every day. And so interval training, that type of exercise, is one of the most powerful ways to keep the heart with all diligence. So we're going to make a list of how to keep the heart with all diligence, and that's interval training. And remember, don't have time is no excuse. We've got 24 hours in a day. Everyone's got that little bit of time. You've just got to make time. You've just got to make an appointment with yourself. So to keep the heart with all diligence, you've got to move that heart. And remember, it's going to get easier. Something else that's necessary for keeping the heart with all diligence, we did try to get this board clean. Oops, It's going, it's going. There's only one way you will not be able to do the interval training effectively, and that is if you're dehydrated. And the other thing that can really slow it down is if you have had breakfast, because it takes 1,200 calories to digest a meal. So when you're exercising, you've got a lot of movement happening in your stomach. And when you start exercising, the blood is needed in your muscles. So can you see there's a little bit of a war starts up. They start fighting for who's going to have the energy. So very important, number 2, that you be well hydrated. Water. The water loss in a day is about 2.5 litres. That's 1.5 litres out through the kidneys, 0.5 of a litre out of the skin, 0.3 of a litre out of the colon, and 0.2 of a litre out of your lungs. That's 2.5 litres a day. So 2 litres must be replaced. The other half a litre can come through herb teas, maybe your juice, maybe your salad, maybe your fruit salad. You're getting some moisture there. But that water must be replaced. Keeping the heart with all diligence, those muscles need water, because out of it are the issues of life, and the best blood thinner is water. But for us to access that water, we need sodium. Sodium in the form of whole salt. Now, let's have a look at the highest concentration of sodium on the planet is seawater. So seawater contains 92 minerals. And of those 92 minerals, 30% is made up of sodium and 50% is made up of chloride. Now, because they make up the largest amount of the minerals in the seawater, the first crystals formed when the water is evaporated from seawater is sodium chloride. And so what man does is he scoops that up, bleaches it white, puts aluminium with it so it runs freely. There's your table salt. And your table salt is a dangerous salt. It only has 2 minerals. Sodium chloride. And if you were to inject sodium chloride straight into the veins, you would kill the person. They're very harsh minerals, those two. They need to be buffered with all the other minerals. The salt that we use is Celtic salt. And Celtic salt has 82 minerals. Where are the other 10? Well, they're in such proportion, barely measurable, that it's inevitable that they're lost in the evaporation process. But hey, 82's a lot closer to 92, isn't it? Now, in that Celtic salt, there are 3 magnesiums. So magnesium sulfate, there's magnesium bromide, and magnesium chloride. Magnesium is an incredibly important mineral in the human body. It's responsible for about 400 enzymic functions. Magnesium is very, very important in the heart because there are 2 minerals that cause that heart to beat. Well, there's a few, but basically these 2. Calcium constricts, magnesium relaxes. Calcium constricts, magnesium relaxes. And so an important part of getting proper heart health, especially if someone has high blood pressure, is magnesium. Magnesium is a water-hungry molecule, which means it absorbs water into itself. And when you put Celtic salt in a bowl on the table, and we have a lot of rain, you come and look at that salt and it'll be quite wet, because it's absorbing the moisture out of the air. When you take a crystal of this Celtic salt and put it on your tongue, already the mucous membranes in the mouth are absorbing the minerals. It is taken in the blood to the cell, and that magnesium causes the water to be drawn into the cell. It's the quickest way to hydrate the human body. Now, around the cell, there isn't one membrane, it's a bilayered membrane. And when the water rushes through the cell into the CBD under the action of magnesium, a little motor is triggered in that membrane to start spinning, and the spinning of that little motor gives us a unit of energy. So when everyone at work is going out to get their coffee or their cigarette to get a boost, you just get your crystal of Celtic salt, put it on your tongue, have a glass of water, and you watch that little energy boost that you will get. And you won't get the drop like they will all get. They might get an initial rise, but then there's always a corresponding drop, and I'll explain that process in a little bit more detail on Saturday morning. Quickest way to hydrate the body. The soils are mineral deficient today. The plants are mineral deficient today. And so doing this, every glass of water is an excellent way to start to recover some of the minerals that so many people in New Zealand, Australia and America today are deficient in, especially the magnesium. Now, there is one drink that leaches the magnesium and the calcium out of the body, and that is caffeine. Now, there was a bit of a groan last night when I mentioned this one. I call it Australia's darling. Is it New Zealand's darling too? What's a darling? Something they love. And it's very, very effective at leaching the calcium and the magnesium out of the body. And most people don't realise that that coffee is a huge contributing factor to dehydration, to heart malfunction, and also to imbalance in heartbeats. So there are some things that have to stop if you want to keep the heart withal diligent, and one of them is caffeine, because of the way it leaches the magnesium out of the body. And as you can see by what I just described, magnesium is so important. Anyone that comes to me with high blood pressure, we do quite a few changes, but we always supplement with magnesium because it keeps that heart muscle at rest. You see, your systolic is your high point and your diastolic is your bottom one. It relaxes that diastolic and brings it down a little bit. And the Celtic salt can do that. But how often are people with high blood pressure told to what? No salt. Now there are four vital elements needed for life. Let me draw the four vitals. And you can find this in any anatomy and physiology book, any chemistry book. Number 1 is oxygen. Number 2 is water. Number 3 is sodium. Did everyone hear that? And check me out on that. Go to your anatomy and physiology book, and if you don't have an anatomy and physiology book, please buy one. We need to know about this house we're living in. The number 4 is potassium, and potassium is found in all your fresh fruits and vegetables. They're the 4 vitals elements needed for life. So if anyone's told they should stop salt, it's very unscientific. It's incredibly unpractical. And what's a baked potato without salt? What's avocado and tomato on spelt sourdough bread without salt? Our palate tells us we need salt. Last night I quoted that verse in the Bible. It's Matthew 5 verse 13. "Yea, the salt of the earth, if the salt hath lost its savour, wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men." How does salt lose its savour? This salt here, with its 2 minerals, has lost its savour. What's the savour? It's all the other minerals. There's a book on salt written by a French doctor named Dr. Lilangri. He says in France there is no issue on salt. In fact, he's surprised at the issue he sees made of salt in Australia, New Zealand, in America. He said, we don't have this issue in France because in France it's hand-harvested salt. It is whole salt. You see, one extreme is table salt, the other extreme is no salt. They're both dangerous. We need to come in the middle. We need that balance. The body runs according to precision balance. You think about it. We cry seawater. We sweat seawater. Baby swims in seawater, in utero. We urinate seawater. Now, you don't have to taste your urine, you might taste your sweat. In fact, in the war, in the Navy, they used to transfuse with seawater if someone needed a blood transfusion because it's very quickly converted to blood. Seawater is called an isotonic solution because it's almost the exact same balance and proportion as is found in the human body. I don't suggest you drink seawater, it's not very nice. But you can take that crystal of Celtic salt before every glass of water. Dr. Robert Thompson, in his book The Calcium Lie, he maintains it's impossible to overdo it, and he maintains that you need to do that every glass of water just to replace the minerals that you lost yesterday. If you're not used to salt, start slowly. We have had guests that say, but I don't have any salt. Let me show you what's happening with no salt. Lining your gastrointestinal tract are villi. Villi look like this. And there's a little receptor site there. And the glucose comes down and comes into the receptor site because it's going to come into the blood. And in that receptor site, there's a carrier. And the carrier says, I will not accept you, glucose, unless you come with a molecule of sodium. And if there's not enough sodium, that glucose cannot get in. That glucose ends up in the toilet. You can read that in the anatomy and physiology book. No wonder sodium's the third most vital element needed for life. I memorised this out of the anatomy and physiology book because I wanted to give it to you from the horse's mouth. Sodium is the main transport system of nutrients across the brush border and into the blood. We need it, but we need to have it the way it's found in nature. And that is with all of its other minerals in its perfect balance. So we need the whole salt. How much do we need? As much as you can take. It's not nice when there's too much salt in a meal, is it? And it's not nice if there's not enough salt. Your palate will tell you. Have you ever seen people using table salt and they put it on everything before they even taste it? Do you know why? Because these two harsh minerals kill the taste buds. No wonder they have to put it on everything. It kills the taste buds. We need salt, but we need to have it in the way that it's found in nature, in all of its balance. So the water and the salt are very, very important. But the way to take the water into the body is little by little by little. Sip it. I never used to drink water. I was breastfeeding or pregnant non-stop for 14 years. So I am an expert on breastfeeding, child raising, childbirth, because I did it for so many years. And I helped many, many people because of my experience. But I didn't drink water. I didn't think I need to. I would just have a cup of tea or a cup of Echo or Caro. I thought I'm getting enough through my fruits and vegetables. Do you know, I often used to get migraines and headaches. Whenever we travelled, I'd get headaches. I hated travelling in the car. I'd always get headaches. I got colds often and I'd get terrible sinus. And then I started to study the body. And then I started to study how much water we are. And then I started to look at what happens when you don't have the water, so I began to drink more water. Do you know, I never get a headache now. I can't remember my last headache, so I should never say never, but it's very, very rare. I can't even remember my last cold. It was a few years ago. And when I do get a cold, I don't get any sinus problems. That is so nice. We have a book at our health retreat. It's called One of the Body's Many Cries for Water by Dr. Batman Geheljic. We'll just call him Dr. B. And another title to his book is He's Not Sick, He's Thirsty. That was me. Another title to his book is Don't Treat Thirst with Medications. Many are sick purely because of dehydration. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a not negotiable thing. You just got to find out how to get it in. Have the water in the car, have the water by your bed, have the water in the kitchen, have the water in your workplace. Sip, sip, sip. And if you sip, 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 and if at the beginning of every glass you take a crystal of Celtic salt, you won't be running to the little house quite as much. And you can see why, because the water is going to get inside the cell. So it's absolutely essential that we be well hydrated. Keep the heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. We need to nourish the heart cell. Tomorrow night we're going to look in detail when we look at the acid-alkaline balance on the best food. But let me just define the 3 essential food groups. So here we have the 3 essentials. We touched on this last night. One essential food group is fibre. Fibre is necessary, and we looked at this when we looked at diabetes, because it slowly releases the nutrients, and it's in the fibre part of food where you'll often get a concentration of your nutrients, specifically in the peels. Another essential is protein. Once you take the water out of the body, the next most prominent nutrient is protein. You cannot heal without protein. The new cell is built up with protein. And the other essential is fat. You see, 50% of this membrane around our heart cells is made up of protein, and 50% of the membrane around this heart cell, muscle cell, is made up of fat. But many people stop fat because of cholesterol, am I right? Cholesterol does not cause heart disease. And I do have room to write this. There is a book you can get, and you might like to write this down. It's an e-book called The Cholesterol Lie by Dr. Dwight Lundell. Now, Dr. Dwight Lundell is a cardiovascular surgeon, and he has performed 10,000 bypasses. Notice the book that he's written, The Cholesterol Lie, showing that cholesterol is not what causes heart disease. There's another book called The Great Cholesterol Deception by Dr. Peter Dingle. He's from Perth. And if you looked at the show on Catalyst, I don't know whether anyone looked at it on iView, last August, Fat or Fiction, it shows there that cholesterol is a non-issue. Cholesterol does not cause heart disease. So I'm going to give everyone a break now and allow me to clean my board so it's nice and white again. And when we come back, I'm going to show you what cholesterol is, and I'm going to show you how it works in the human body. Remember the old proverb, Proverb 14 verse 6, knowledge is easy to him that... Because there's a lot of really misinformation about cholesterol. So with cholesterol, 80% of the cholesterol that the liver makes is made from glucose. And 20% of the cholesterol that the body makes is made from fat. You see that equation? It's not the butter on the bread, it's the bread under the butter that's the problem. And last night we looked at the dangers of wheat and how when the wheat was hybridized in the 1950s, it produced a type of wheat that is very difficult for the body to handle. Now last night we looked at how it gets the blood sugar level up higher than even sugar because of the type of starch that was created in the hybridization process. And in a minute I'm going to show you the gluten and how it actually affects the function of the heart. But first of all, we'll look at cholesterol. Now there are 2 types of cholesterol, 2 main types. There's high density lipoprotein called HDL, and LDL is the low density lipoprotein. So let me draw a heart vessel here and show you what's happening in the heart. Because HDL and LDL, they're like the maintenance team on the blood vessels in the body. And HDL's role is to carry away excess cholesterol. So it's called the carrier. Whereas LDL, it's the repairer and the rebuilder. That's its role in the body. So when you consider that LDL is the repairer and the rebuilder, where are you going to find LDL? You'll find LDL wherever there's a need for repair, wherever there's a need for rebuilding. So the two different types of cholesterol are high-density lipoprotein, HDL, and low-density lipoprotein. Because of its low density, LDL is always found on the edge of the blood vessel. And because of its high-density lipoprotein is always found in the middle. That's where you'll find the two different types of cholesterol. Now, let's say a person is a smoker. 4,000 chemicals in one cigarette, and that can cause damage in the arterial wall. So the chemicals in cigarettes can cause a hole in the arterial wall. Mercury, it's a neurotoxin. It can cause a hole to be made in the arterial wall. Yeast or mold in the blood can cause a hole to be made in the wall. And if the person's on a high wheat, high sugar, high alcohol diet, feeding the yeast, can you see what's happening? What's going to plug up the hole in the arterial wall? LDL. LDL plugs it up. Remember what LDL is? The repairer and the rebuilder. It'll plug up the hole. That's what it does. Now, what's supposed to happen is the person's supposed to stop smoking. The person's supposed to get out of the mouldy house. The person's supposed to get the mercury fillings out of their mouth, or instead of having tuna and salad for lunch, they have hummus or lentil burgers and salad for lunch. The person's supposed to stop smoking and drinking and high wheat, high sugar. And at the same time, that's a person's supposed to be eating highly nourishing food. So where's your fibre? All your plant food, plant-based have fibre, your whole foods. Where's your protein? Your protein is found in your legumes, your lentils, chickpeas, lima beans, tofu, only if it's organic, nuts and seeds. And where's your fats, your nuts and your seeds, and also your coconut oils, your olive oils? When a person is eating those nutrients, the body can heal the hole. Can you see that? All those nutrients basically are all the building materials that the body needs to heal the hole. And then HDL comes along and takes away the excess cholesterol. Can you see how these two work together in maintaining the arterial wall? And often LDL is blamed as the bad cholesterol. The body doesn't make anything bad. No, they work together in maintaining arterial strength. Because if nothing plugs up the hole, the blood can leak into the tissues and we can die. What an amazing body that God gave us. But do you know what's happening with many people? Many people don't realise what the smoking's doing to them, or the drinking, or the wheat, or the sugar, or the mouldy house, or the mercury fillings in their mouth. Many are sick through ignorance. So they continue. And the person's so busy they don't have time to cook the lentils, and all they've got time for is cereal, or the quick sandwich for lunch, or the quick pasta 2-minute noodles for tea. And so they don't have the nourishment needed to repair the hole. Not just plug it up like LDL, to actually repair it so HDL can be taken away. And so what's happening in the arterial wall? It's building up and up and up and up and up and up. So what's happening in the arteries? It's called atherosclerosis or arteriosclerosis. When I worked as a psychiatric nurse for 18 months, I worked in the operating theatre, and we would do basic surgical procedures on psych patients. And we did a bypass one day. And when the artery had been taken out, and what do? They actually cut one from the leg here and sew that in the heart. And by the way, that artery wall is not made of strong stuff like this artery, so it's not going to last as long. And the surgeon got the artery that had been cut out, and he got like tweezers, and he started to pull the white gristle out of the artery. And we look at that white gristle and we go, oh, that cholesterol's bad. But you know what is never addressed? Why is it there? Why is it there? And you know, some people don't have any build-up on their arteries. Why do some do and why do some don't? Newton's third law of motion states that to every action there is an equal and an opposite reaction. There is always a reason. And so what people are told, it's the fat. Yeah? It's the fat. It's not the fat. In fact, every muscle, every cell in the body needs fat. The brain is the fattiest organ in the body. About a year ago, Time magazine did an article on fat. Front page of Time magazine, little curl of butter, and it said, fat. No, it said butter. Why we were wrong on the fat. And it was about a 6-page article, and it addressed all the research that had been done or quoted in the 80s, saying fat was bad, showing that all this research was flawed research. It's not the fat. Fat is not the problem. And when someone has a heart attack, or someone has a bit of a build-up and a potential to heart attack, what do they put on? Cholesterol-lowering medication, yeah? Well, your liver is the organ that makes cholesterol. And what this medication does, two of the most popular are Lipitor and Crestor, they block the pathway in the liver that the liver uses to make cholesterol, thus stopping the body making so much cholesterol. But that pathway is also the pathway that the liver uses to make coenzyme Q10. Have you heard of coenzyme Q10? That's your heart protective enzyme. So someone has a heart attack, goes on cholesterol-lowering medication to prevent a heart attack, they can actually be increasing the risk of heart attack. There is no research to show that Crestor and Lipitor prevent heart disease. Did you know that? There's even a book called The Human Cost of Lipitor. Let me tell you the side effects of Lipitor. Muscle wasting, interested? Dementia, Alzheimer's, memory loss. And they've added another one to that now, breast cancer, because it's from cholesterol that all our hormones are made. In fact, if cholesterol levels go too low, that person's going to be vitamin D deficient, and there are 2,500 receptor sites on the DNA for vitamin D. Body can't function without vitamin D, and vitamin D is made from cholesterol. Sex and stress hormones can't be made properly if you don't have enough cholesterol. Too low cholesterol is just as dangerous as too high. I've had guests say to me, well, my husband's on Lipitor and his memory's gone. I don't know anyone who's interested in muscle loss, memory loss, or Alzheimer's or dementia. Are you? And you can actually very safely come off cholesterol-lowering medication immediately with no ramifications. It is not proven to prevent heart disease. It's a non-issue. What causes heart disease? Absolutely the build-up in the artery. But why is the build-up there? It's because of the high sugar, high wheat, high alcohol diet. It's because of the lifestyle, basically, that many are doing today. It's a whole lot of little things that are causing this. So another no is not fat, but it's wheat. Why wheat? Well, when the hybridization process of making the wheat, the gluten or protein structure of wheat was changed. So originally, wheat was Enkhorn. No, I don't think that I should be there. I think that I should be there. Enkhorn wheat, that was the original wheat, and it had a very fragile structure. And that fragile protein or gluten structure means very easy to be broken down, so easy to be broken down in the grind, in the cooking, in the chewing, in your digestive enzymes. And it is not sure when, but a few thousand years ago, there was a field hybrid with another wild grass that produced emmer wheat. And emmer wheat is not quite as fragile, but it is still fairly fragile. And it is the emmer wheat that went through the intensive crossbreeding. So the hybridized wheat that was hybridized in the 50s went worldwide in the 70s. So by the 1990s, in New Zealand, in Australia, in America, every pasta, every wheat, every cereal, every donut, cake, etc., is made of the hybridized wheat. And that structure of that hybridized wheat is incredibly complex. Very difficult for the gut to break down. And you look at the timeline, 1990s, well established, that's when all the gluten intolerance, gluten sensitivity, gluten intolerance to the point of celiac. Celiac can't even touch it. Gluten intolerant, really, they should only have it once in a blue moon. Gluten sensitive, they can probably have a slice of bread or wheat. So basically, gluten sensitive, gluten intolerant, and gluten intolerant to the point of celiac basically is just describing the intensity of the intolerance. Can you still buy the original? You can buy spelt and you can buy kamut. And spelt and kamut have the same structure of the emmer. So you can still buy that. You can still buy spelt and kamut. You can buy it as pasta, you can buy it as bread. Celiac, who are severe intolerance, often they can't even handle the spelt or the kamut. But often gluten sensitive or gluten intolerant can. Now, if that hybridized wheat was made into a sourdough bread, because of the culturing process, it breaks down the gluten structure to make it a little bit more fragile. And if spelt is made into sourdough bread, it can bring it back to that original structure of the Enkhorn wheat. Now, if someone eats wheat and they have an intolerance to it, do you know it can get that blood pressure up? So blood pressure can be caused by wheat. So how do you know what you are? I've got a challenge for you. Stop it for 2 months, see what happens. Well, what will we eat? Well, you can buy some very nice spelt and kamut breads in New Zealand. Go to your health food shop.